30-year-old Tosha Lampkin was born on January 23, 1975, and raised in Houston, Texas. She had a passion for sewing and would often make her own clothes and style outfits. At 17, Tosha gave birth to a son, and although she was still in high school, her family said her son was her whole world. Tosha would later own a daycare that she'd run with her cousin, Tanya Douglas. It was a lot of work, but they both loved kids, and it allowed Tosha to provide for her son in ways that weren't possible for her growing up as a child. Together, they'd often organize trips to Shreveport, Louisiana, to visit their family and unwind. It was only 4 hours from Houston, so on April 22, 2005, Tosha and Tanya were on their way to Shreveport once more. Around 11 p.m., the women arrived at Bossier City, which was only 7 minutes outside of Shreveport. They checked into the David Motel for the night since they felt it was too late to get to their family's house. After settling in their room, they got hungry and began looking at food places nearby. They settled on ordering takeout from Waffle House, and Tosha left the motel to pick up the food around 3:30 a.m. Soon after, Tanya fell asleep, but when she rose into consciousness around 6 a.m., she realized Tosha did not return with the food. In a panic, she began calling around to see if Tosha might have visited the family in those hours, but no one had seen or spoken to her. They also had no connections to anyone in Bossier, which made it an even bigger struggle. Around 6 a.m., 2 police officers were dispatched to a car fire located on Coon Road. When the firefighters arrived at the scene, they found the car fully engulfed in flames. The firefighters put out the fire, but the flames were so hot that the trunk of the car had melted away. There were 2 bullet holes near the gas tank and shell casings near the vehicle. When they looked into the trunk, they observed a horrific discovery. A charred body lying on its right side with its head facing towards the driver's compartment. The body had been burned beyond recognition. Detectives soon ran the license plate and learned it was rented by Renee Farley at Hertz Rental in Houston, Texas. Once they spoke with Renee, they discovered that she rented 2 cars, one for herself and another for 2 of her cousins, Tanya Douglas and Tosha Lampkin. They rented a Nissan Altima, and Renee shared that Tanya actually called her that morning, wondering where Tosha went. Once officers learned of Tanya, they headed towards the David Motel. Tanya recalled that the police knocked on her door that morning, and when she answered, she was told that her rental car had been found burning on the side of the road, and there was a body found in the trunk. Immediately, she knew it was Tosha. After gaining consent, the police searched the room and seized Tosha's ID, toothbrush, and a citation she received earlier on the drive. Tanya shared with them that she last heard Tosha leaving to get food from Waffle House. The detectives then went to Waffle House to retrieve her food receipts, and they were able to confirm that she did pick up the food. But when they reviewed the motel's grainy surveillance, they saw the Nissan Altima leave the lot and return shortly after, followed by a small red car. The 2 cars briefly stopped at the motel, then left at the same time. This red car was pretty distinct. It had 2 different sets of rims with Ford on the fronts and Toyota on the backs, a missing strip from the side paneling, and a towel in the back window. Police then shared the video footage on local news outlets with hopes that anyone recognized the red Toyota Tercel, and to their surprise, a woman called to say that the red car in the surveillance belonged to her daughter, Laquita Stafford. When police talked to Laquita, she informed them that she loaned her car to a 21-year-old man named Dwight Bacon, who was gone all night. He told her he was visiting his girlfriend on April 22nd around 9:30 p.m., and she only agreed to let him take her car if he'd fill her tank. She did not see him until the next morning, but she found a contact lens case in the back seat with the name Rebecca written on it. Police identified Rebecca's speed and took her in for questioning. She testified that on April 22nd at 1 a.m., she pulled into her apartment complex, turned off her ignition, and was listening to the radio with her windows down when she heard someone say, "Hey." When she looked up, there was a man standing next to her window with a gun. With speed, she fled from the man and told the complex security guard. Her car, with her purse inside, was taken and discovered 2 hours later with almost all of the purse's contents missing. The perpetrator was later identified as a man named Brandon Davis. After speaking with Laquita, the detectives first tracked down Dwight Bacon at his apartment and took him to the station for an interview. He denied having any involvement in Tosha's murder, but detectives were not buying it. They knew he was driving that unique red car and that he had to have someone else with him. His family was cooperative and also mentioned to the police that Dwight had been associated with a school friend named Brandon Davis. 5 hours later, police tracked down Brandon and he agreed to be interviewed at the station. He initially denied any involvement in Tosha's murder and admitted that he was in the red Toyota with Dwight, but it wasn't that day. The only issue with that statement is that April 22nd was the one and only night Dwight drove that car. Eventually, after several hours of intense interviews, Brandon opened up little by little on what took place. He confessed that he and Dwight saw Tosha leaving the Waffle House and followed her to the David Motel. He forced himself into the passenger seat of Tosha's car at gunpoint, and she was told to follow the red car with Dwight. He also admitted to holding the gun at one point without any plans on killing anyone. While everything was happening, he said he was speechless and felt like he was standing outside of his body. He felt that if he said anything to save her, he would be killed because Dwight had the gun. He stated that Dwight started the fire in the back seat of the car and shot at the car while Tosha was alive and locked in the trunk. He also said that he and Dwight took money from Tosha as well. When he was asked if she was assaulted, he responded, "Don't make me answer that." Police also searched Dwight's apartment and found a .380 caliber handgun and a box of bullets that matched the ones found at the scene. They also discovered that the gun was bought the morning of the murder from a local pawn shop. At the end of July 2005, police positively identified the remains in that car as Tosha Lampkin, using her toothbrush and a piece of her femur and right rib. It was confirmed that she was alive while the car was set ablaze, and her official cause of death was ruled as asphyxiation. Detectives were notified that a former inmate of Brandon Davis, Jarrett Ardoin, might have some information in Tosha's case. Upon interviewing him, he shared that in the last few months, they've been incarcerated together, and when he asked Brandon what he was in jail for, he provided the full story. Jarrett stated that Brandon did admit to assaulting Tosha with Dwight and forcing her to perform acts twice at a separate location before going to the place of her death. Brandon also told him that he had no intentions of killing her and that it was just a robbery gone bad. Tosha begged the men not to kill her, pleading that she had a son while screaming and crying in the trunk. But the men were in fear that she'd remember the license plate of their car, so they proceeded to not spare her life. Jarrett also provided a letter that Brandon wrote him in jail that read, "I'm going to tell you something because I know you probably got a shitty feeling about me. First, I'm not a hardcore gangster. As we followed that person, I know in my mind that that person didn't have nothing worth committing a crime over. The stuff we got was nowhere near, and the money wasn't close to 100, maybe 80. And when you was steady asking me questions, I was tripping. What did we do with the money? Hell, my friend, it wasn't shit to do anything with. Like you thought, I was trying to show a mother I was still wild and went along with some dumb shit, and I deserved to get punished. I'm just a young mother that's went through a little hard time and made a lot of bad decisions. On April 25, 2008, Brandon Davis was found guilty of capital murder, which meant the jury was tasked with choosing between life in prison or the death penalty. Brandon's family stated that they were heartbroken by what had happened, but the death penalty would not bring Tosha back. The defense team added that he was physically abused by his father as a child, which greatly influenced his path into a life of crime. On April 28th, Brandon was given life in prison without the possibility of parole after a deadlocked jury could not unanimously decide in favor of the death penalty. After Brandon's sentencing, Dwight Bacon accepted a plea deal from the prosecution to plead guilty to second-degree murder and spare him the death penalty. Dwight, too, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Brandon attempted to appeal the decision in 2009, but it was still affirmed. Both men are currently still serving their sentences in Louisiana State Prison. Since the trials, there hasn't been any new updates or news on Tosha's case. Her story is now featured on ID Channel's See No Evil on Season 3, Episode 13. Her son, Marcus, who was 13 years old at the time, is now 32 with no coverage available on his life. This was a tragic and unimaginable way to lose a life. May Tosha rest easy in paradise, and may her son and family find healing and closure. And thank you all for watching.